Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Well, last night, I consider it to be a great night of boxing. I thought it was simply spectacular. Now, from a betting perspective, it was a mixed night for me. Keith Thurman delivered, right? Keith Thurman beat Robert the Ghost Guerrero. Gamblers, you were standing in line after that fight ready to collect. That was a win. The Broner-Molina fight was a loss for me. Broner was brilliant. Broner won the fight as I thought he would, but not in the way I thought he would, and that was a loss. Broner did not get the KO, right? But Broner was brilliant. Let's talk about both fights. I'm going to lead with the Broner fight. The fight I thought would end by KO, but which was clinical. Now, let me say this, and I don't say it lightly, and I understand at times here online I come across as a bit strident, right? Some of you feel I'm a bit overly sensitive and a bit overly conscious about things like race and gender. But I'll say this. Athletes of every race, right, need to realize that they're playing to different crowds, right? And the crowd you're in front of might have a bias, and that bias might not be in your favor. But the crowd you're in front of is only one crowd. There are others. Now, Adrien Broner comes in. He has a lot of personality, right? Let's just say his personality is, in my opinion, spectacular, right? As he walks in, I'm watching the match with my girl who isn't a hardcore boxing fan. She didn't really know who Adrien Broner was that much. And as he walks in the ring, the format they had him walking in the ring by himself, doing most of the ring walk by himself, right? And as he walked in the ring, my girl started laughing, right? She was totally enjoying the way Broner interacted with the crowd, right? Broner's persona is not a corporate persona, right? Broner's persona, quite frankly, is an Ali level persona, right? Big personality. Fits the room. So Broner walks in the ring. And you know the rest. Big personality. Molina, by contrast, more of a subdued personality. Broner then proceeds to throw down 4 rounds of boxing that are, if you're giving out grades, A level. This is Adrien Broner at his best, right? If you're a fight fan, you're looking at him and you're saying, look, the big personality fits the level of game. He was on his game. So I'm watching the beginning of this fight, and the crowd, of course, isn't charitable to Broner. It takes a few moments, but then you realize that the crowd's actually in favor of Molina. Right? Now keep in mind, all Broner has done is shown up and literally brought his A game with him. What do I mean by his A game? Let's go through it piece by piece. You know, Broner is there standing up and he's bending his knees. He looks at times, dare I say it, like Pernell Whitaker. He's brought a vertical element to his game. So he's there and he's jabbing up top. Oh, by the way, the jab is stiff. The jab is working, right? The jab is so stiff. As I was watching the show, I was thinking Larry Holmes and Carlos Monzon, right? He has a stiff jab, right? It's not the most fluid jab. He's not pumping a lot of them, But when he throws it, it's stiff. It stops a puncher like John Molina in his tracks. But Broner also brought with him another part of defense that's a little bit subtle. He brought hand speed with him. So Broner is hinting at throwing punches. And his hand speed is such that it completely kills Molina's ability to throw punches. Right? Molina is paralyzed. He's standing in front of Broner. He's afraid to open up. Now picture this. Here you have Molina, who was in the 2014 Fight of the Year, right, against Lucas Matisse. Here you have Molina, who really, is a guy who likes a wide open fight. He's normally there to bang with you. He's hoping to trade with you, right? Normally he's a hunter. You thought he's in the ring against a sharpshooter, a very technical fighter, like Adrien Broner. And one would have thought, at least I thought, Molina's eyes would light up if Broner stays in the pocket. And I thought Molina would try to let his hands go. Wasn't his only chance of beating Broner to do so by KO? Wasn't that his only chance? Didn't you think he would have to let his hands go? Like Marcos Maidana did when he fought Broner, right? Maidana's not timid in that fight. Maidana comes out, he lets his hands go. Didn't you think going into this fight that Molina would have to try to roughhouse Adrien Broner? Here's what happened. Molina gets in the ring. He then proceeds to get hit with some stiff, and I mean stiff, Adrien Broner jabs. Then Broner's doing a vertical thing. So Broner, without really bending over that much, while in his stance, bends his knees. He just drops down. Let's say he's like this. He just drops down by bending his knees and is even throwing the jab to Molina's body. Molina couldn't figure out whether Broner was feinting or throwing. So Molina just stands there, inactive. Folks, that's why the fight goes 12 rounds. Let me dazzle you for a second with the CompuBox stat of not the night, but of the year. The John Molina who duked it out with Lucas Matisse, a big puncher, faced Adrien Broner, who stayed in the pocket for about 10 and a half rounds. Right? Forget what they said on the telecast. The telecast was up and down. The telecast wanted you to believe that Broner was moving around the ring. Broner's in the pocket for 10 and a half rounds. At least he was on my TV. Right? He's in the pocket. He's not dancing. His feet are wide apart and he's in the pocket for 10 and a half rounds. And John Molina, according to CompuBox, in a 12-round fight, 12, lands 54 punches. Right? Let me repeat that. John Molina lands 54 punches in a 12-round fight. Let's do the math. Folks, if he landed 5 punches a round, 5, he would have landed 60 punches. He landed 54 punches. Right? Masterful performance by Broner. I give Broner an A. Ray Leonard was on it. We were blessed because you had a highly technical fighter throwing a masterpiece in the ring, and you had a masterpiece boxer commenting on him. And you heard Ray talk about a couple of things. Now, let's talk about Ray Leonard for a second. For all the pretty boy hype on Ray, understand Ray stopped more than 50% of the guys he fought. Ray Leonard ended fights, right? So, Ray Leonard, of course, was saying, hey, close the show. And, of course, as a fighter, as a gambler who was hoping for a knockout, I was with Ray when Ray was saying, look, you need to close the show, right? Understand Ray Leonard, when he says that, he's talking from experience. But let me also say, too, that Ray made a couple of points, and it's an A performance by Broner, right? I thought Broner lays down a classical performance where years from now you could put on a film of this fight and just laugh. It's that dominant. But Ray said, look, he'd like to see Broner throw not just jabs to the body, which Broner did spectacularly well, but he wants to see Broner throw power punches to the body, right? Let me add my own little gripe. Adrien, that uppercut was there all night if you wanted it, right? Broner throws the uppercut, comes awfully close to having that punch end the fight, right? One point, Molina's wide open. Broner comes in, dips the shoulder, throws the uppercut. Molina doesn't move his head. Broner thought Molina was going this way. The uppercut misses right here, right? In addition to a few more power punches to the body, I'd love to see Broner throw that uppercut a lot more. That uppercut is a game-changing punch. Let me say this too. Broner's defense is high risk. It's like Vitaly Klitschko's defense. It's like Ali's defense. Now, he's in his mid-20s. But there are times in fights where Broner, who's precise, right? Understand behind the, hey, I'm just here at the party persona is actually a very precise fighter. Broner at times would just lean his head. He's a leaner, right? So, Molina's throwing wild shots, and Broner leans his head a little bit. So the punch misses him like this, right? Now, I'm nervous about near misses in fights like I am about near misses when I'm in an airplane, right? These near misses, hey, man, that's too close for comfort, right? It would have been great if Broner would have at times had a hand up, right? But at the same time, I can't fault Ali for fighting guys and just leaning back and having the punch end here, right? The same way, I praise Vitaly for using length for leaning back and the punch ends here. I praise Broner for having an acute awareness of spacing to know when Molina's too far away to hit him, right? But my point to you is, Adrien, there came a time where Ali meant to lean back from punches and instead got hit by them, right? Look at the Larry Holmes fight, right? The problem with leaning is you're relying a lot on your reflexes. Now, in your mid-20s, you can do that. As you get older, you might want to augment your defense with a hand up, right? Broner at times, and it's spectacular stuff. Molina starts throwing, and Broner will just lean back, the punch swings by. Then he ducks, the punch swings over his head. Look great. Look spectacular, right? Rather than try to please the fans, who I'm going to talk about next, right? Also please yourself. Get in the habit of having a hand up if you have time to get a hand up, right? There are times in this fight where Broner just leans back. Now, if Molina were a different level fighter, right, Molina would have faked the punch knowing that he's leaning back just to take the extra step forward to catch him cold. But Molina, of course, is basic. So he's just throwing punches, right? So I thought Broner was spectacular. Now let's talk about this crowd. Broner's in the pocket for 10.5 rounds. The only time he starts to move around the ring is in the last, I'd say, 4.5 minutes of the fight. Right? Now, you know the rest. The crowd then starts booing. The crowd's been biased against Broner all night. What I want Broner to do is I want Broner to think about Ali's best moments. The Sonny Liston rematch, right? One of Ali's best moments. That iconic photo of Ali standing over a fallen Sonny Liston. If you go back and look at that film, you're going to find out that the crowd boos Ali throughout that fight. Right? The crowd's booing. I say to hell with the crowd. Right? Adrien, there are a lot of folks looking at this film who were entranced by what you were doing. Right? Broner's real crowd, to me, is the boxing hardcore. Not the yahoos fortunate enough to receive tickets from the MGM Grand for this fight. I thought that crowd was hopelessly biased. I thought it was ridiculous. Right? If I had a red flag close by, I'd throw a red flag on the crowd. The crowd just wants to see blood. It doesn't want to see technical brilliance. Right? But understand, Adrien Broner is very popular. He's on NBC because there's another crowd. The crowd interested in boxing brilliance. I hope Broner always keeps his eye on that crowd and not the local crowd he's in front of that may have come for the other fighter or may have come hoping for a car crash involving an African-American athlete. Right? Let's be blunt here. The crowd last night was ridiculous. Let's talk about the Keith Thurman, Robert the Ghost Guerrero fight. And let me say this about John Molina. Right? You have the slower hand speed. You need a knockout to win the fight. You're fighting against one of boxing's best technicians. You know Broner's above average in terms of his ability to defend himself. Right? And you know the rest. Molina decides he's going to imitate Zhou Shiming. Right? Isn't throwing enough volume. Even his corner, Joe Goosen, one of boxing's better trainers, is pleading with him to throw punches. And he's in there not throwing punches, hanging around. Right? And he's not doing anything to tire out Broner. Right? He's not in there trying to, wrestle Broner and stuff like that. Trying to clinch him, tire him out. When they're in the clinches, there's a gap. Broner is a master clincher. To the point where Robert Byrd, the ref, is yelling at the guys, hey, you have a hand free. You have a hand free. He's yelling at them. Right? He doesn't want to break the action when they're clinching and guys have a hand free. Broner's dominance extended to the clinches. Molina, I don't know what he's doing. He's not throwing punches for most of the fight. He's not doing anything to tire out Broner. Right? He's not leaning on Broner. He's not wrestling Broner. He's not even banking body shots, hoping to slow down Broner later. Instead, he's so concerned about not getting knocked out, not getting caught with a clean Broner counter, that he just stands there early in the fight. Right? To sum up this fight, 54 punches landed by Molina. That's not power punches landed. No, 54 punches landed by Molina over 12 rounds in a fight where Adrien Broner spends, in my opinion, 10.5 rounds in the pocket, right in front of him. Brilliant performance. The Guerrero-Thurman fight. Let me just say this. Thurman comes in, has the superior footwork on Robert the Ghost Guerrero. How superior is it? The southpaw can't land his jab. I encourage you to look at the first 3 rounds of this fight. Guerrero cannot even land his jab. right? Thurman is set up at such an angle that while he's dodging the jab, he's able to come back and counter with right hands. It's a breathtaking start to the fight. Thurman immediately has the advantage. The only thing Thurman doesn't have going for him early, of course, is the crowd. Where'd they get this crowd? Right? Let me say this too. The reason I'm harping so negatively on the crowd is because if you're involved in the promotion, you really can't talk about it, can you? The fighters understand that they need public support for their careers. Right? The promoter's happy any crowd showed up for the fight. Right? PBC can't come out and say, wow, this crowd really, booed a great performance by Adrien Broner and seemed to be biased against Keith Thurman as he himself comes out with a brilliant performance against Robert the Ghost Guerrero. Right? No one has a vested interest to badmouth the crowd. But let me say this, how could anyone... Well, put it this way. Guerrero's from Northern California, where I am. He truly is a great guy. He is. Right? He is a family-first guy. I personally feel Juan Manuel Marquez, who I think the world of, dodged Robert Guerrero for years. Didn't want to fight him. Right? For years. Guerrero, at a point's a mandatory contender. The world at that time hardly knew who the Ghost was. Juan Manuel Marquez, a great fighter, knew who the Ghost was and dodged him. We fault fighters for dodging opponents. Right? I'm telling you, Marquez dodged Guerrero. Guerrero's one of the best people in boxing. Right? Guerrero, at the top of his game, takes time off because his wife has leukemia. All of that is true. If they were handing out awards for Humanitarian of the Year, hey, Robert Guerrero's on the short list. No question about it. I thought this was a boxing match. I thought we were supposed to actually be into what was happening in the ring at the event. If we were, then understand Keith Thurman was masterful. Right? Thurman is widely misunderstood as just a big punch. He's not. He has ridiculous game around it. You saw how mobile he was in the ring. Now, against guys who are a little bit better than Robert Guerrero in the pocket, right? I know he's retired now, but Julio Diaz really was one of the better guys in the pocket, right? People might recall he got a draw with Sean Porter when Sean Porter was unbeaten. Well, Julio Diaz fought Keith Thurman. Right? Thurman hit so hard that Diaz actually quits on his stool after breaking a rib against Keith Thurman. But before Diaz breaks his rib, he's in the pocket and he's teaching Thurman the art of boxing in the pocket. Well, let's just say Thurman's learned. Thurman's in against a southpaw. He uses Guerrero's southpaw orientation against him. Right? He's set up at an angle, and it's all angles, where Guerrero can't land a jab, Thurman's coming in, and Thurman's throwing a wicked right hand. The right hand's not even straight. It's a wicked right hand. It takes a lot of timing to do what Keith Thurman is doing. Right? Thurman also doesn't need to touch you with a jab. He can lead with power shots. Right? This is the opposite of the Broner fight, where Broner is keying things off a jab. Even his defense, right? He's hinting at a jab, and he has Molina going like this. Right? Here, Keith Thurman's not even pretending to throw a jab for much of this fight. He's coming in, he's throwing heavy right hands. When Guerrero tries to move, Thurman moves away. You find out Thurman is much faster footed than Guerrero, in addition to being much faster handed than Guerrero. Both guys can punch. Let's just say Thurman wasn't around to get hit by Guerrero's punches. like Guerrero was around to get hit by Thurman's punches, right? Only in boxing, too, can you have a guy with a big swelling on his head. I'm telling you, it looked like the swelling Hasim Rockman had against James Toney. And no one in Thurman's corner panics. Thurman has one of the best corners in boxing, Dan Birmingham, who used to be with Winky Wright, right? Thurman's off to a fast start. Here's how the Thurman corner thinks. He's off to a fast start. In my opinion, he clearly has won at least 2 of the first 3 rounds. There's an accidental headbutt. It's big. It's big. Right? Under the Nevada rules, Thurman at the end of the 4th round could have said, hey, I can't continue, and could have had the fight go to the scorecards. Right? I believe Thurman, before the end of the 4th round, could have said, I can't continue, and had the fight declared a no contest. Right? Now, think about it. If Thurman were Nonito Donair's corner, let's name corners. Right? If Thurman were Nonito Donair's corner, they might have said, hey, we can't continue. Gone to the scorecards and won the fight without the other 8 rounds. Right? At the end of the 4th round. Because Thurman certainly won at least 2 of the first 4 rounds. I would say Thurman might have been pitching a shutout by the end of the 4th round. Right? Thurman's corner never thinks of it. They take this big mass on the side of Thurman's head. They take out ice and an end swell. And they push it to the side. Folks, it never goes away. It just starts spreading throughout Thurman's forehead. Now let me say this. You could imagine what it was like being Keith Thurman. Because I'm telling you, knots on your head affect your vision. You got a lot of blood rushing this part of your face. I'm telling you, all of this is tightened. Right? In other words, you can't even blink your eye like you normally would. You know when you get an injury, if you've ever been unfortunate to have like a knot on your head at any time, and I have to say, I've had a knot on my head, right? I'm telling you, it completely throws off your game, right? You feel that knot. Your blood's racing up here. It's like having a bad headache and having it mess with your balance. The Keith Thurman corner has no excuses. There are no apology crowd. There's never an issue on whether Keith Thurman is going to continue in the fight. Thurman doesn't want to win a 4-round fight against Robert Guerrero. He's all in. He wants the entire glory. So the end of the 4th round comes, and you know what? They just deal with the injury. So you see Keith Thurman later in the fight, and his whole forehead is inflamed. You get to the post-fight interview, right? And keep in mind, the crowd, of course, is pro-Guerrero. You get to the post-fight interview. Keith Thurman, who's old school, who's Carmine Basilio old school, never mentions the knot on his head. Never. Right? He's just talking about what a champion Robert the Ghost Guerrero is. Right? I thought it was a masterful performance. If I'm Guerrero, I have to think about my career here. Right? No doubt Guerrero has the punching power to be successful. Right? But he really has a problem against mobile fighters. Right? A guy who can move around the ring is going to give him problems. And if I'm him, I would look around the landscape at 147, and I would realize that he'd have a hard time against a Sean Porter. He'd have a hard time against an Amir Khan. Right? If Kell Brook's machete-attacked leg is still how it was before the machete attack, he'd have a hard time against Kell Brook. Right? Now, the weights were fascinating here. I know this video is running long, but let me say this. The Adrien Broner fight was supposed to take place at 140 pounds. By the way, Broner missed weight. He came in at 141. Just food for thought. Understand that both of those guys were well north of 150 when the fight started. Not just Broner, but Molina. Right? These weight divisions are a bit of a mirage. Likewise, in the Guerrero Thurman fight, both of the guys were well north of 150. That fight was supposed to take place at 147. I believe one of the guys was above 160. That's how preposterous it was. Now, I want people to understand that that's just one school of boxing. There's another, to which I belong. The Floyd Mayweather school. Right? Understand that some of the guys who fought last night are physically bigger men than Floyd Mayweather. Right? Mayweather has made a decision. When he's fighting at a weight, guess what? Mayweather actually is that weight. So, Mayweather fought a guy with yo-yoing weight. Oscar De La Hoya back in the day. I encourage everyone to look at the weights the guys weighed in at. Right? You're going to find that Mayweather was several pounds below the 154 limit for the fight. Biggest fight of his career up to that point. Right? He's several pounds below the 154 limit. Understand, with Floyd Mayweather, there isn't this ridiculous weight gain between the weigh-in and the time of the fight. You had guys last night who had gained more than 10 pounds. You had guys who had gained something like 15 pounds between the weigh-in and the fight. I believe Adrien Broner weighed more than the junior middleweight limit before the fight. So understand, this weight thing is a mirage. That's the best way to look at it. Broner, Keith Thurman, they could easily be fighting at 154 pounds. Right? These guys choose, for whatever reason, punching power, etc., to stay at lighter weights. In my opinion, it cuts two ways. Just think of Bernard Hopkins' career. Right? Bernard reached a point where he could barely make weight at middleweight. Right? Then, of course, you saw him at light heavyweight. Right? He decided to move up in weight. He skips 168. He goes to light heavyweight. He fights Antonio Tarver. And as you look at that fight, Hopkins had energy he didn't have his last few fights at middleweight. My advice to these guys is, hey, look, stop starving yourself. Right? I understand Broner had a bad experience against Marcos Maidana. Okay, fair enough. I understand Broner's last 4 fights have been in something like 3 different weight classes. Okay, fair enough. But Broner couldn't make 140 pounds. Right? He couldn't make it. Adrien, your defense would hold at 147 and at 154. Right? Broner might actually even have more energy if he doesn't force his body to lose that extra weight class right before a fight. Food for thought, Keith Thurman, he's a big man. He has a big punch and he moves awfully well. Right? Don't sleep on the footwork and foot speed of Keith Thurman. Keith, what do you have to lose by challenging Gennady Golovkin? Even if it's at 160, you don't have to come in at 160. The only difference would be that you wouldn't have to lose all that weight before the weigh-in. You'd be able to actually weigh what you weigh. Right? As I've said here in an earlier video, I believe Golovkin would have more trouble with smaller, quicker guys than he would bigger guys. Right? Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you on both fights. I'm going to give the crowd a failing grade. 2 guys threw great fights yesterday. right? Broner and Thurman. And the crowd's out there less than impressed with both guys. Come on, man. Come on. You know what I mean? Rooting for underdogs is nice. Recognize brilliance when you see it. I hope both guys understand that whoever they're in front of, right, that's just the local crowd at the time. No one remembers if the crowd in Lewiston, Maine, right, booed Ali. No one remembers it, right? We forget that Ali was the villain, right? That's the grain of salt with which fighters need to take the crowds in front of them, right? Because understand, history remembers great fighters. Focus on greatness, not pleasing the guy in Section C. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.